is Eddie, the Knoxville Bear.
He's a legend, there's no doubt about it.
Well, he was one of the best players that ever lived.
Eddie Taylor may be, I take that back, not maybe, is the greatest all-around player that ever walked. If you ask any of the players here that are old enough to remember good players and say, who's the best player in the world, they won't say Luther Hopsconi, you know, those other names. It's Eddie Taylor, first word out of their mouth. It's incredible how good he played. Eddie Taylor did things that mortal man can't do on table, and did it consistently.
You might. Ta-da! Here you go.
Break it apart. And then back to play.
I think Eddie should have been in the Hall of Fame a long time ago. In fact, he was my idol when I was a kid. When I was about 18 years old when I first ran into him in Silver Hill, Maryland. And I watched him play there for the first time, and it was the first time I really seen a good all-around player. I had seen straight pool players, but not a guy banking balls like Eddie used to bank the balls. He just was awesome. I don't know how many balls he ran in a row just banking balls, but he played all the games, and he had a heart like stone. I mean, he never failed under pressure. He was just the perfect player.
I think it's wonderful, and it's just an honor for the Hall of Famers to just unite with just one more great.
Presenting his final and most spectacular show of the city, the Mighty Glove will attempt 50 balls in one single shot from 2 tables. This one-time only show is at 36.
Recently in conversation with a young man who had claimed that some other person was a greater bank pool player than Mr. Eddie Taylor, the Knoxville Bear, and I just don't believe that could be true, because I haven't ever seen anybody who could bank balls better than he could.
I can't see with my glasses.
Oh, no. You're kidding me.
I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. If I hadn't banked 3 in a row when I was playing, I'd have been sad.
This ball has to take the place of that ball. And that is the ghost ball theory.
Eddie Taylor, this is a long overdue honor. He's the embodiment of everything associated with championship pocket billiards. And in the opinion of me and many other experts, he's the greatest player that ever lived. He was the best bank pool player in the world for 30 years, best one-pocket player, best 9-ball player. He went to New York City one year, never having played a game of straight pool, and defeated every great player in the world. And he's a first-rate human being. I don't know what else there is to say about Eddie Taylor.
Paul, look which one you like, Paul.
Well, I think it's just wonderful. Unfortunately, I wasn't around to see Eddie play in his prime of playing, but it's my understanding that he was probably the greatest bank pool player ever to live. In all games, he gave everybody fits. It's my understanding that he could win at any time and did win at any time, basically.
Being a fellow Hall of Famer, I'd like to congratulate Eddie Taylor on being inducted into the Hall of Fame. I started playing the sport when I was just 9 years old, and Eddie was out there with Luther Lassiter and Irving Crane and playing straight pool, and I met him at the Commodore in New York City. And so I can honestly say that I grew up with Eddie Taylor, and I'm very pleased that he's part of the Hall of Fame and that the sport is recognizing his accomplishments in the sport.
Eddie Taylor, without a shadow of a doubt, is the greatest player of his generation. There is no question about it. Ed Taylor will go down in history as the greatest bank pool player and possibly the greatest one-pocket player that ever lived in this century.
I just think it's a wonderful thing, and it's a long time coming, and it couldn't be anybody more deserved than Mr. Taylor.
Met Eddie Taylor, actually never got a chance to play him, but I met Eddie at the Johnson City tournament way back years ago. So I got to see him when he was doing some of his best playing, and he was very personable. I was a green kid out of college. He didn't know who in the heck I was, but he took some time to say hi. He may not remember it now, but it meant a lot to me then, and it's one of those things that you stay with. They stay with you the whole time, and it kind of was one of the launching pads for me. Other than that, I kind of watched him from a distance. You know, I never got a really chance to really play with him or anything. But I'm looking forward to being on the stage when he is inducted tonight. In fact, I am the Master of Ceremonies. Tonight it's our pleasure to introduce a gentleman who is a stranger to no one, or it won't take long. If he is right now, it won't take long for him to be in your circle of acquaintances. He's from St. Petersburg, Florida. Now you already know. This is his 8th decade of pool. He's played 5 presidents. His departed wife, Carrie, was my best girl, but then again, he's after my wife now. He has been called, in Southern terminology, the greatest thing since sex and salt pork. Mr. Poole, Red Jones.
Well, I tell you to start with, I'm a little country boy from Alabama. I can't take much of that. I'm too emotional. But I thank you very much for it. There are 8 million stories in the city. Well, I can tell you this, there's 8 million stories about Eddie Taylor, too. In 1964, Eddie was with me and my wife. God bless her soul. I had her for 55 years, and she supported me in everything I ever did in pool. Eddie was with us in Washington, and he left to go to the tournament at Johnson City. The year before that, he and Lassiter wound up in the finals, and Lassiter beat him. Well, this time, in '64, they were out there, and darn, the next thing I know, I get a telephone call, and it's from Eddie. I'm in Washington. And Eddie said, "Red, I'm in the finals." I said, "Well, that's wonderful." He said, "Well, you got to come out here." I said, "I got to come out there?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I want you here for the finals, but," he said, "mainly I want you to meet the girl I'm going to marry." Hell, I didn't even know he was in love. I didn't know what the hell was going on. Well, his bride-to-be and I sat together. The tournament wound up with Eddie and Lassiter being 1-1 in the straight pool in the 9 balls. It wound up in the 1 pocket. and it got down to the finals, and Eddie banked a 7-ball the length of the table, and as it passed the side pocket, it was obvious it was going in, and ABC Wide World of Sports was televising it, and just as it got past the side pocket, Eddie says, "Grab that 7-ball for Carrot Red." Bill Fleming from ABC said, "What the hell's going on?" Yeah. But anyway, we got the 7-ball. And I'll tell you right now, Eddie Taylor is one of the best things that happened to the game of pool. I'll also tell you that the best thing that ever happened to Eddie Taylor is that girl that he married when he called me to come out to Johnson City, Vi.
I'm real proud for him, and I think it's a wonderful thing to have happened to him, and I think he's deserving of it.
At this time, I want to introduce to you, and I'll ask the members please to please rise when I mention you and accept the applause of the audience. Gene Belucas, Hall of Fame. Gene Belucas. Lou Butera.
In 1986, I was elected to the Hall of Fame at the same time Eddie Taylor was on that ballot. I voted for Eddie Taylor because Eddie Taylor was the first player in my life to teach me a lesson about how to beat another great champion. And in 1962, when I got out of the Army, he taught me the meaning of the word humble. That's how you get your opponent and you beat his brains in. Eddie Taylor beat my brains in, okay?
Steve Miserak.
I personally was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1980, and it is now 1993. And in my opinion, Eddie Taylor should have been inducted before me because he was a legend. He was the greatest bank pool player of all time. And if you thought that he couldn't play the other games, just get down and play him. I tried to play him some straight pool, he beat me, and that was my best game at that time.
Mike Siegel. Nick Varner.
I think Eddie Taylor's induction into the BCA Hall of Fame is one that everybody in billiards across the country welcomed and thought was long overdue. I'm really happy and proud to have Eddie Taylor go into the Hall of Fame.
Rudolph Minnesota Fats Wanderone. And one of tonight's inductees, Mr. Eddie Taylor. At this time, have Nancy present to you the Hall of Fame plaque, the Hall of Fame ring, and the Hall of Fame blue blazer with the crest to Mr. Eddie Taylor.
Eddie, it's with great pride and pleasure that I present you with this plaque into our Hall of Fame. It's the highest honor that we know that we can give you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy.
And Eddie also gets a Hall of Fame ring, which I will give him now.
I'm sure you all can understand how I feel up here after following Mr. Red Jones. I am quivering plumb down to my toes
This is not my racket. I want to thank you, Nancy Hart, for saying those wonderful things about me. You and Gordy have always been so supportive, and without your help, I might not have had this day. Thanks so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, to steal a quote from the great comedian and pool lover, Mr. Jackie Gleason, how sweet it is. There are so many people to thank tonight, and hopefully I will not leave anyone out. But should that happen, just please remember, I am much more nervous than when I was facing Lassiter in a winner-take-all finals. Naturally, I want to thank Bruce Marr, John Lewis, the BCA, and their membership for honoring me tonight. I would also like to thank Pat Berger for her assistance. Many thanks go out to Red Jones and his lovely wife, who have been like family to Vi and I over the years. In fact, they were witnesses to our wedding 28 years ago. I salute them both. Special thanks goes to Mike James, who owns Pocket Billiards Room in Shreveport, Louisiana, and has always been my #1 fan. Thanks again, Mike. There are several others, Mike Roberts, Billy Schick, Don Weathersby, and Buddy Hall, who have been so instrumental in making this night happen. Thanks, fellas. And to all the players and friends at Pocket Billiards Rooms that always believed I deserved to be and would someday be in the Hall of Fame, thank you also. I would be remiss if I didn't thank all of you here tonight by honoring me with your presence, and all of the fine people at the trade show who have been so nice to me and my wife these last 4 days. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, and not in any way the least, I want to thank my wonderful wife, Vi, to know that we received this prestigious induction together. Because believe me, when I say I wouldn't be here or anywhere else without Vi's love and caring. Thank you, darling. This is a tremendous day for my family and me. Some of them have come here tonight. It is great to see their faces. I so wish my mother and father and my son could have lived to see this. They would have been very proud of me tonight. As I join these great players and great men who have contributed so much to the game of billiards, I do so humbly. Many of them were my contemporaries during 30 years of my competition, and I so admired their talents and enjoyed their friendship. For those before and after my playing career, I am overwhelmed at the opportunity to join you in this union. You are such an illustrious group, and I am ever so humbled to be included. There were those whose time has passed that helped me along the way. They will always be in my thoughts and prayers. Well, I've probably said enough. Such a happy day for me. You know I still miss competition. Oh, for just one more championship match with Lassiter. What I wouldn't give for that just one more time to face the challenge, face the pressure, and perform like you know you can. What a thrill that would be. Thank you all so very much, and Godspeed to everyone.
Boy, that's not enough to speak about Eddie Taylor.
He's a good man.
He had such form and class around the table, and he had the touch. Yeah, just a great player.
I said I'll get new doctors if they don't let me go see Eddie Taylor join the Hall of Fame.
Nicest guy you ever want to meet's right here.
He does it by radar.
Glad to be here.
Best game in the world for kids. Keeps them inside.
But Eddie surprised everybody in the crowd and cut it paper thin into the corner pocket.
No. Nobody wanted to play Eddie.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. If you play pool good, you can come and stay in places like this.
I get in and you got to use a wide-angle lens. Now, what the hell's going on?
Congratulate you. I'm so proud of you.
Eddie can still pocket them balls. You can bet on that.
Congratulations, Eddie.
I never went. So yeah, Eddie Taylor was here.
He's a true gentleman.
Well, I think we're very lucky to have a friend like Eddie.
That's right, folks. See you later.
Better late than never. Right?
Those are very kind words.
I'm going to try to make the one ball straight inside. Hope none of them balls fell apart. 9 balls straight in the corner pocket. This is slow motion version. Fast motion. 1 ball in the corner pocket. This is called the machine gun shot. The reason it's called the machine gun shot is because it sounds like a machine gun when I play a billiard off of all of these balls. It click, 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 click. That is, if I'm lucky enough to make it. I'm trying to make the 3 ball. Nice shot, Taylor.
Yes.
Gee, thanks. I'm going to try to make the 1 ball. The yellow ball, this one right here, straight in this pocket. Keep your eye on the yellow ball. Did you see it? Now, this is called the railroad shot. I'm trying to make the 1 and 3 in here the 2 over there, the 4 here, the 5 there. The cue ball comes around, goes up the sticks, and comes down and makes the 6. Hopefully. Be with me, Lord. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Shreveport, Louisiana, and Billy Schick's Billiard Parlor. Today, I'm going to show you a little bit about pool as I know it. Some basics like proper stroking and English, and I'll try to make a few bank shots. I hope this helps your game. Here we go. A good thing to do is try to put your left foot forward and your back foot like, I'd say 1.5 foot back. And a lot of the ladies don't like to stick out back here, but if you don't mind, when you come down, kind of stick out a little bit in the back, which I don't do that. And keep your eye on the ball, your head down, and follow through to extreme.
That's what people want to learn about right there.
You must follow through at all times, whether you want to follow the ball or whether you want to draw the ball. You still must follow through. It's kind of like if you play golf, the more you follow through, the more backspin you'll get on the green. Well, this works the same way. The more you follow through, the more backspin you get. Now here's a little simple draw shot. But watch where the cue stick goes. The more you want to draw it, the more you follow through and the more bottom English you use. Like this. Let's say you would want to put the cue ball on this shot here, you would want to put the cue ball close to that chalk. So therefore then, you want to follow through more and hit it a little bit more to the bottom and to the right. I missed the ball, see, that don't count. It don't work when you miss the ball. That's not very good, but the professional players know within a foot most of the time of where the cue ball is going. That's on a good dry table. But on a table when it's wet, it's like 3 feet instead of a foot. But let's get back to this. The good thing to practice if you're a beginner is just take the cue ball and knock it up and down the table. And take 1, 2, 3, and follow through. Follow through, exaggerate. 1, 2, follow through, exaggerate, and try to get it to come right back to you. And just keep doing this. Just keep doing this. Do this every day for like an hour. That way you develop the stroke. 1, 2, 3. And you get it to coming right straight back to you. Try to hit it right in the center. If you don't have a cue stick, use a broom or a mop. But you want to develop that to where it comes right straight back to you. Now, of course, this is easy for me, and I'm sure that it's not easy for a beginner. But first, you want to just make a fist to get you a bridge. Just make a fist, put your finger with your thumb, and then put the stick between the finger and the thumb. And then spread your fingers out. That's all there is to it. Take 1, 2, 3, and follow through to extreme, because later on it won't be that way. And now I'm going to show you how this works, extreme follow through, which you will be able to see. Let's say I have this shot, and that's the 8 ball, and this is the 9 ball. These balls are both frozen. Now I'm going to try to draw the ball here, and then go up there and play position on the 12 to make it in this pocket. Now I want you to watch, though, where the cue stick goes to after I shoot. I didn't do a very good job because I was concentrating so bad on but if you notice, the cue stick went way over here. Most people think you have to pull back like this. You don't. That's not very good position, although I could probably make that one. Hey, I ain't as blind as I thought I was.
Go ahead.
This is right-hand English right here. This is left-hand English. This is top English. And this is bottom English. But for the beginners, I would advise you not to use any English. Hit the cue ball right, dead center. And if you practice that every day for a while and you get your stroke, then wherever you look, that's where you will hit. This is what happens when you do the right practicing. Okay? Yes, sir. Speed means more than anything in the world on banks. Let's see, let's take this shot here. Say I want to bank this ball one rail in this pocket. The harder you shoot, the more English it might take. In other words, if I shot this ball and hit it straight, it would hit along about right here. But if I shoot it hard with a right-hand English, it'll stiffen off of that rail. It'll stiffen up. See? See how it does? See, it's coming back this way. That's because I used right-hand English and hit it hard. Now I'm going to show you what happens. The same identical shot that I'm going to shoot easy with the same English and everything. See where it hit? Exactly where I said. So here's another shot right here. If I shoot this shot, let's put it out here. If I shoot this shot, I would mark it. If I shoot this shot easy, it should hit about right here. It might even hit that shot if I shoot it easy. If I shoot it hard, though, I should bank it. That's how much difference there is in shooting hard and shooting easy. Well, that's off. That ball curved. I used to bank all 6 of these balls off of the diamond. Right. I used to take 8 and 9 shots. For the money. If you've got a table at home or anywhere else, is to watch your speed, that's all. A lot of times you have to shoot with a speed, but on a shot like this, you would just shoot it with normal, just normal. But don't forget to follow through on every shot. That is the most important thing of all. And try to shoot all balls with the same speed. Don't shoot hard, because the speed means everything in banks. If I hit this ball on the right-hand side, and don't use any English here, hit the cue ball in the center, when it hits that rail up there, that cushion there, it's going to throw to the right. If you do it from the other side, it would throw it to the left. In other words, when you hit a ball on the right, it's going to throw to the right when it hits the rail. Say I've got this shot here. This is my pocket, and I want to put the cue ball over here in case that I miss. I want to put the cue ball right over there, right there, and try to bank this ball in here. See what I'm talking about? Let's say we got this back, and that's almost straight across. That's almost straight across. So you wonder how you get the cue ball out of the way. Now on this shot here, if you use a barrel of left-hand English, it wouldn't help you a bit. But you use a little left-hand English, you hit it on the side like that to throw it in. Another thing about banks, if the ball is close to the rail and you're trying to hold it up, you're trying to stiffen it. Let's say the cue ball is here on the spot, and you got a ball over here, just off one ball off of the rail, and you want to stiffen that ball. You do not draw this ball. You shoot it with a more or less a dead ball with left bottom English, but you don't draw it. That's exactly what should happen right there, what I just did. Say this ball here is like 1/16 of an inch off of the rail, and I want to go down there, bank the nine across the side. If I drew this ball, if I tried to draw that ball to get, no way you would kiss it every time. But this way, like this, just right-hand English is all you use. I even did it too much. But that's very important to not try to draw the ball when your object ball is close to the rail. When I was either 15 or 16 years old, I was playing a guy bank pool 9-4 for $1, which was a high back then. So I banked 9. And the fellow said, "Go ahead and see how many you can run, Eddie." Naturally, I knew the fellow real well. And so I banked 13. My 14th bank was laying right here, and the cue ball was here. I banked it 3 rails on my 14th ball, and the 1 ball was on the spot. I had to spot it up because I'd already knocked that in on the break, and you have to spot them up after you get through shooting. So after I banked the ball 3 rails, I put that up and banked it over here. I banked all 15 balls. Now, I didn't think anything about that. In my rest of my life, I did that 4 more times, and I played a lot of banks. But that is like breaking the balls wide open and banking all 15 balls is like a miracle. because so many times balls get tied up, you know, and you can't bank them. The ball might be hanging in the pocket like that, and you can't bank it. The only thing you can do is make another ball and knock that in, and then it comes up after you get through shooting. Now later on, I think I was either 18 or 19 years old, and I was playing a guy named Bill Webster in Asheville, North Carolina, for $2 a bank. If he got 7 and I got 8, I won $2. What happened was there was 12 balls left on the table, and I banked the 12. Then I broke the balls and made a ball on the break, which comes up after you get through shooting, and I banked all 15. Then I broke the balls again and made a ball on the break. Then I banked 10 more, which was actually 37, 12, 15, and 10, which I don't really think that record will ever be broken, because it was a miracle that it came up that way. Because most of the time, if they have a tournament in bank pool today, it's like the first one that gets to 25 or something on that order. They don't play that way anymore. The very good bank pool players used to play, they'd play safety break, and nowadays they rack a 9-ball to keep the game faster, because they don't want all those safeties to appear on TV. It takes too much time. It was like when Willie Hoppy was the champion so long at three-cushion billiards, they finally changed it to where they could start off with either white ball. That's three-cushion billiards is where they only have 2 white balls and a red ball and no pockets. And so they changed it because it was so boring to watch all of the safeties, which one pocket is sometimes with some of the players that are really more safety playing than safety than offense. But I was really awful proud. Like I said, to bank 15 balls, I imagine a lot of the good bank pool players in their life never banked 15 in their life. Now, I've banked 13 and 14 a lot of times, but not 15, because a lot of times, like I said, there'd be a ball in the pocket. You can't bank that. So that's why it's such a hard thing to do. But I'm going to try to bank a few balls, just throwing the balls out on the table. Y'all will have to kind of, I'm going to make some alibis, because I have very bad depth perception, and of course even if I didn't have the depth perception, I couldn't play like I used to, but I can maybe bank a few shots for you. I'm going to try to bank the one across the corner. Five rails, the right-hand corner pocket. You can't tell I've played before. Right on top of it. Just remember, ladies and gentlemen, you must follow through. Be true and follow through. I'll just show you something I used to do. what I would do, I would shoot this ball, five rails, and run around the table and shoot it in the corner. Now I'd be running around the table, see, and shoot it in, but I'd run around the table. I'm afraid to do that now, but I call that my athletic shot, and it was beautiful. Everybody loved it. That's it, the Brown Derby. We did about 30, 40 minutes on the radio. We're telling stories, Joe Bossis and myself. Now the next day, they asked me to go. I didn't want to go. I'd have rather Joe gone. But they asked me to go, the promoters, to go to this place. They had the big light, what do you call it, the big spotlight outside. Now I see all these microphones up there. There's about 20 microphones up there on the stage. And I said, who's going to interview me? And the guy said, nobody, Eddie. Oh, you just start telling about the tournament. You just tell about the tournament and this and that in Long Beach. And he said this and that, and it's where it is, and the other. I said, where's the waiter? I said, where's the waiter? Get the waiter quick. I don't know when I'm going to have to go out. I said, you mean I'm going to have to get up there on the stage and I'm going to have to talk and nobody's going to interview me? Just like those guys that's up there? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Waiter, bring me a triple Jack Daniels immediately. I was scared to death. It's about like getting up in front of a firing squad.
Hello, I'm Violet Taylor, and I would like to welcome you to our home. I will now turn the program over to Eddie Taylor, who has quite a bit to say about pool.
Well, actually, I started playing when I was about 7 or 8 years old. My father used to take me into the billiard room when I was 5 years, when I was a baby, actually, and it'd set me on the table and I'd roll the balls around while he played on the next table. And later on, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, he used to take me into the billiard rooms, and while he was playing. Then, when I was about 8 years old, he bought me a table that was about like this. I guess you would say it was about 2 feet by 4 feet. And it had like marbles for the balls, and it had a spring that you shot the cue ball with, which was like a white marble. And then later on after that, they had we lived near the park where they had the roller coaster and the batting cage, and I used to help out around there, and the fellow that had the batting cage bought a pool table that was 2.5 by 5. It cost a nickel to play, and it had 10 balls. And I got to playing on that, and I got to where I played pretty good. Then we moved back downtown about 2 blocks from the YMCA. And they had a table I joined the YMCA, and they had a table in the YMCA that called croquet. It was like a croquet set on a pool table that had no pockets. But they had three balls. They had 4 balls: a red ball, a yellow ball, a blue ball, and a cue ball. And every time you shot a ball through a wicket, you got a point. And after about 4 months there, I was able to beat anybody at the YMCA. It just seemed like everything kind of came natural to me. And after that, one night when I was going to school, this boy and I used to run across the street, and this guy would let us play, and we'd play one game of rotation. It only cost a nickel. Then we'd run back to the school. It was just across the street, near the heart of the town. And then after that, one night I went to a movie, and I got out late, and I came by the pool room, and I thought I'd go up and say hello to Mr. Sears, and there was nobody there but just a few people, and I asked him if I could play a game with him, and he let me play because they only had about 30 minutes left before they closed at 11 o'clock. Well, after that, I started laying out of school. And, of course, my mother didn't catch on for a while, but finally she did, and every time she'd catch me in a pool room, she would threaten to blow it up if they let me back in there again, so I'd have to find another place. And finally, after quite a few months, she had me put in a juvenile home because I wouldn't go to school. I stayed there one day, and I called her, and I told her to come and get me. I'd go back to school. At that time, I was in the first year of high school, but I didn't finish the first year. But she finally gave up. I told her, I said, all I see is pool balls. I said, I ate them, dream them. When I'd go to bed at night, I'd bank balls out of the ceiling, 2 rails out of the corner, and all that stuff out of the ceiling. I've talked to a lot of the fellows that were very good, that were champions, and most of them told me that they did the exact same thing. You know, I guess that's probably the way with most people that wind up being very good at their game. They have to be kind of like a fanatic, you know, on the game. So that's about the story of my life as a young pool player. My mother, of course, finally gave up and of course she hated pool like I don't know what, for years and years, until I finally won a big tournament.
When was the first time you gambled on pool?
When I first started playing. The first time I walked in the pool room. Well, that's what I'm saying. They were playing what they call the game 41, and they shook pills. And the pill, you broke with one of the pills, and the other 2 pills you kept, and you tried to get the balls to match the pills to make 41. If you went over that, you busted. You was out of the game. And otherwise, the one that was the closest to 41, the game, if it was 4 playing, the game was like 20 cents. And the winner would get a dime in checks, 2.5-cent checks. And that was the first time that I walked in and played pool in a pool room. And I think I won about 15 cents.
That's
check. That was, I was probably about 12 years old at that time.
When was the first time you went on the road?
I was about 15 years old. I was either 14 or 15. I can't remember for sure. But I had gotten to where I could beat anybody in my hometown. And there was a fella in Morristown, Herman Roddy, owned the pool room, and he had a son, Herman Roddy Jr. He used to come to Knoxville and play John R. Cook, who was the best player in Knoxville until I finally got better than him. And John R. would usually beat him, and I could beat John R., so I knew I should beat Herman Roddy Jr. So I got in my suitcase, I had about $40, which was quite a bit of money back in those days. Let's see, that would have had to be about 1930, because I was born in 1918. So I was about, let's see, would have been about 1932 maybe, or 33. And so I played him. I got on the bus and went, and I played him, and he broke me. So he gave me like 50 cents, and I went back home. So about 2 or 3 months later, I finally got a hold of another $35 or $40, playing for dimes and 15 cents and quarter. And so I caught the bus, and I went again to Morristown. Played him again. He broke me again. Give me 50 cents, and I went on back home. 2 or 3 months later, I went back. I had $35, $40 again. And I played him again, and I finally beat him that time, and I kept going. And the reason, I know that everybody's going to wonder, how did I get into the pool rooms? The reason that I got into pool rooms was because after I was probably 13 years old, or maybe 14, I always wore a suit, a tie, and a hat. And I was around men a lot, more than I was around kids. Therefore, I didn't act like a kid, I didn't talk like a kid, and nobody ever asked me for my ID, because by that time I was playing pretty good.
You didn't play like a kid?
No, I sure didn't play like a kid, because you hardly ever saw any kids, because at that time you had to be, I can't remember if it was 18, I think it was 21, but I'm not positive about that. But then I kept going that time, and from then on I was mostly on the road. If I would actually hitchhike. It was you had no problems hitchhiking in those days. The only problem you had was you'd have to wait out there 30 minutes before a car even came by. It was there were very few cars. But when a guy'd say, "Which way you going?" I'd say, "I'm going whichever way you going." I didn't care where. I didn't have no destination. I was just going anywhere that I could play pool. And that's kind of the story of my life.
It didn't scare you being on the road alone?
It was back then. They didn't have all the murders and crimes that they have today. Everybody left their doors open. The screens, half the time the screens wasn't even latched. So it was never no problem about hitchhiking. Never no problem.
At this time, were you playing mostly bank pool, or what games did you play?
Well, that I'd like to say something about that for sure. To start with, the pool is what I really fell in love with. But I finally found another place that only had like 3 pool tables and a snooker table. That was in the basement, and this place was really hard to find, although it was in the heart of town. So I started hanging out there, and I got to playing snooker. By the time I was 15 years old, they played with 15 red balls back then, everywhere, just about everywhere you went. And one day, I ran all of the red balls and the numbered balls. I don't remember how many I ran. I didn't keep count. I just make a red ball and a 7 ball, a red ball and a 5 ball, a red ball and a 6 ball, a red ball and a 4 ball. And I never counted what I ran, but I ran every one of them. And I didn't realize at that time what I had done, but I had done something real great when I was 15 years old. But there wasn't any money to be won playing snooker. You had to show too much speed, and there wasn't that many snooker players around my hometown that played for money. And I had gotten to where I didn't play unless I was playing for money. Now the game that was played at that time for money in a radius of 400 miles, any way that you went from Knoxville, Tennessee, was bank pool. All the big money games were on bank pool. Now, when I'm talking about big money, I'm talking about $10 a game was big money. That would be like playing today, I would say, for $250 a game. That's what I would say, playing for $10 a game in 1931, 32. That would have been just about the equal amount. So I quit. I didn't exactly quit playing snooker, but I started playing more banks. And John R. and another fellow that I can't remember his name, they were the best bank pool players and the best pool players, really, of anything in Knoxville. And John R. gave me some odds. I can't remember. I made him play me with his gloves on. I made the other fellow play me with his overcoat on. But in about 6 months, they didn't have to wear no gloves, and they didn't have to wear no overcoat. And 6 months after that, I was giving them a ball. So bank pool became my special game because that was the money game. Everywhere you went, bank pool was the money game. Like I said, within a radius of 350, 400 miles. Atlanta, Chattanooga, Birmingham, Cincinnati, Louisville, Lexington, Asheville, North Carolina, Charlotte, just about any way you went. Memphis, Nashville. So that was my game, and everybody. Then it got out that I didn't play anything but bank pool. But that was the biggest joke of all times. In 1942, 43, 44, I would have played any living human 9-ball. Any living human. But, it didn't come down to that. But I offered to play a lot of people that didn't play.
How about one pocket? I know you're champion.
One pocket, I really got to play in one pocket when I was on the road. When I met Earl Shriver, I was 16 years old. I met him in Lexington, Kentucky, and we got together. I was 16 and Earl was 21. At that time, I had 2 suits, 20 white shirts, 40 ties, and a couple of hats. And Earl asked me, he said, put on an old pair of pants and a sweater. I said, I don't have any, so I wore Earl's sweater. But he taught me how to hustle. The only thing I ever knew to do was walk in the pool room and say, does anybody around here like to play 9-ball or rotation? They played mostly rotation back in those days for $1 or 50 cents or whatever. But Earl, he was a master at hustling pool. He'd tell everybody how good he was, and then he would get up and not play good at all. And so
he taught you one pocket?
He had, but when he left after he won the money, he always left them smiling. But then Earl got me started. I had seen one pocket before, and I had played one pocket before, but I didn't know all that much about it until I got with Earl Shriver. And after I got with him, every now and then we would stop in a town, and if there wasn't anything, if we didn't get any action, we'd just play each other to see who was the best player. And I got to where I could play pretty good. The first time I played, I'd say the first 6 months I played one pocket, I would always forget the other person owing a ball. In other words, I'd always forget which my pocket was. A lot of times I'd start shooting in the other fellow's pocket. I'd get so confused. But I finally got out of that after about 6 months. But that's the story about the bank pool. And then, of course, later on, when Earl was with me, I told that story yesterday, so I won't go into that, to where I ran the 37 balls in Asheville, North Carolina, playing Bill Webster, who was worked for the mail company, the post office. But he was a very, very good. I think he was from Union City, Tennessee, to start with.
Did you ever lose all your money on the road and not have any way to get home or anything?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, there's a lot of times that I got broke when I didn't get to play, and a lot of times I'd have to call Mother and she'd send me $5, which was quite a bit then. A hotel, of course, then was you could get a nice room for $1.25, tub, shower, and everything. The only thing you didn't have was a radio and television. No fans. A lot of times in the old hotels in the small towns, if you didn't get there early, you didn't get a fan. The fans cost $0.25. And if you didn't get there early, a lot of times they'd be out of fans. So what I'd do, I'd get in the bathtub in cold water, if it cold as it would get, and then I'd lay down. I wouldn't dry off. I'd just lay down on the sheets, turn over a couple of times, and you'd be dry, and the sheets wouldn't be as warm. And a few times when I didn't have a car, I don't want anybody to think that everything was roses. I didn't have a car. I slept in a few bus stations. I slept in a few depots. I slept in a few parks. And then when I had a car, I'd have a few dollars, not much, but I didn't have much to get a room, so I'd have $7 or $8, and I'd say, well, I'll just sleep in the back of the car. So I'd sleep in the car. And I slept in the car quite a bit.
Did you ever see any of or play with any of the old classics like Ralph Greenleaf?
I played Ralph Greenleaf when I was 14 years. I think I was either 14 or 15 years old. And I ran 42 balls and scratched on the break. He beat me. He ran 125 an hour. He broke the balls like really to give me a shot, you know. And I played him in the afternoon, at night. John R. played him in the evening, in the afternoon match, and John R. owed 3 when Mr. Greenleaf went out. And that night I played him, and I ran he broke him give me a shot. And I ran 42, and I went into the brack, and I made the ball, and I scratched. And he ran 125 and out on me. And I watched Greenleaf play in several different towns, play exhibitions. This is hard to believe, but that man ran over 150 balls. I saw him play in about 5 different cities, and I just happened to be there, and I'd watch him play the exhibition. And he ran over 150 balls unfinished, and he'd say, ladies and gentlemen, I have to quit. I don't have too much time. And he'd show, a few trick shots and then leave. So he was a great player, and he wasn't only a great player, he was a tremendous sport. He did not think he was a god. He was just a hell of a guy. He broke probably all records. Him and his Chinese princess wife, they were on that circuit. I forget that circuit in New York, that big circuit, and they played on the stage, and they had mirrors, and he was making like $2,000 a week when other pool players was probably making $30 a week. Playing, Jimmy Cash told me that he was playing for the Brunswick people, and he made $50 a week in expenses.
So you played Mr. Karras as well?
No, I never played Jimmy Karras in my life. He was never in but one tournament that I was in St. Louis, and I didn't do any good. It was straight pool. I did not do any good. And so he played Lassiter in the finals, and he beat Lassiter pretty bad.
You told me earlier a story about, and you used the name Greenfield.
Well, I used to, when I'd go in to the pool room, I learned this from Earl. I'd start telling everybody how good I was, and I'd say, I just got through playing Ralph Greenfield. His name was Ralph Greenleaf. And, of course, everybody knew Ralph Greenleaf. And I said, I just got through playing Ralph Greenfield. I run 18 balls. And I said, I bet there ain't nobody around here can beat that kind of shooting. Of course, everybody's laughing, making fun of me, you know. But when I'd walk out with the cash, the guy said, well, he wasn't quite as dumb as y'all thought he was. But I'd start telling him how good I was, and then I wouldn't make any balls. And I'd say, just wait till I get warmed up. I'll really show you all some shooting. But then I wouldn't make any more balls, and finally they said, well, I thought you said you was a world champion. You couldn't. I said, well, just wait. I said, I know what's wrong. I said, I just can't shoot unless I'm betting big money on my stick. So they're all about laughing at me. I said, if I'm shooting betting big money on my stick, I said, I'm really good. And they said, well, how much you want to play for? I said, oh, you wouldn't want to play for what I want to play for. They said, how much you want to play for? I said, oh, they don't need talking about it. You wouldn't want to play for what I'd want to play for. And they'd like getting real mad, you know. I said, now you wouldn't want to play a game for $38 and a quarter, would you? You know, put it up. Now, if I could go ahead and luck the 9 in or whatever, I'd start going toward the rack with my cue. With the cue out of the rack, and they'd say, where you going? I said, well, I didn't think you'd want to play anymore after that shot. And they said, bet you 50. And that was like what I was doing a lot of times. That's what Earl taught me to do, but a lot of...
giving them enough rope to hang themselves.
It's like if you go in a bar and you sit down beside somebody and you start telling them how good you are. Right away, they're going to think, this guy probably can't beat me, even if he's not a good player. So that's what we always call reverse psychology, is telling somebody how good you are. They'll think that you aren't good unless you prove to them that you are.
Another great player of that era was Mr. Irving Crane. Did you know Irving Crane?
They called Irving Crane the Deacon because he was such a straight-laced, straight-looking fellow. He looked like I'd say a country lawyer or a country doctor. Dressed very nice, very neat, and his picture was all over the wall in all of the pool rooms all over the United States, and probably even in some other countries. But one time we were both in Washington, D.C., and he was playing for the Brunswick people at the Army camps during the war. But we rode over this day, evening, he wasn't doing anything, so we rode over to Baltimore. And Crane said, I don't want to be on any of the winnings or any of the losings. And I said, fine. So we went upstairs at this place, and I played some fella bank pool, and I beat him 4 games for $20 a game. And a fella came up to me and wanted to play me. It was getting late, and a fella came up to me and wanted to play me 5 out of 9 for $50, 9-ball. And I said, I don't play 9-ball, but I'll let my cousin play it. Now, you must remember that Irving Crane's picture, a huge picture, is on the wall. Of course, he don't have on a hat, but his picture's up there on the wall as a world champion in 1942. So the fella said, okay, I'll play him. Now, Irving Crane naturally carried his own cue, but he also carried his own rack of balls. And he naturally didn't have those with him, and he had on a ring like I've got on that had a diamond on it that he got for winning the World Championship in 1942. And he would not take that ring off. But I finally made him take that ring off when we went in the billiard room. Now, he played him, and actually the guy was very lucky. It was on a 5 to 10, and he beat Crane. He was a good player, but Crane could have beat him if they could have kept playing. But anyhow, we went on back to Washington, and Crane was really upset because he lost. I said, don't worry about it. We were still $30 ahead, and it didn't bother me at all, but it did bother him very bad. So the next day he had to go play somewhere at an army camp. I went back over there by myself, and I played the guy that he played, and I got the 6 and 9. Now, people that plays pool will understand that. I could win on the 6 or the 9, and he could only win on the 9. In other words, I was getting some big odds from him. First he gave me the 6, then he gave me the 7, then I played him, then he gave me the break, and then we played even. And when he got back, he knocked on my wife's door. We used to play hearts every night. We three. We lived right across the hall from one another by accident at the same hotel. So when he knocked on the door, my wife Ruby went to the door, and he came on in. He said, "Where's Eddie?" She said, "Well, he went back over to Baltimore." Well, after they went ahead and played some casino or something, and by the time I got home, maybe an hour later, he said, "Well, how'd you do?" I said, "Well, that guy that you played, he gave me the 6 and 9. And he said, "How did you get the 6 and 9? And I said, "I just asked for it." And he couldn't understand that. And he said, "Well, how'd you do?" I said, "I won 800. And but he could never understand how I got the 6 and 9 and then the 7. I said, "I just asked for it." But a lot of those fellas, their pride wouldn't have let them ask for the paint off of a ball, but I wasn't out there for my health. I was out there to make money. And when I went in a pool room, a lot of people might say, "Why did you beat this fellow? Why did you beat this fellow?" Those people thought I was an idiot. They actually thought that I was an idiot, and they was trying to rob me. So I never felt too bad about robbing them.
When did you first meet Minnesota Fats? I know you're friends.
And when I was 14 years old, Minnesota Fats came to Knoxville, Tennessee, and we played I think Fats was either 20 or 21 years old. And we played all night long. We played one pocket and banks. We played banks for $2.50 and one pocket for $2.50, and we played all night long and broke even. My wife and I had a billiard room with Red Jones in St. Petersburg, Florida. And we was trying to raise money for the American Cancer Society and selling tickets, and I called Fats. Him and his wife, Evelyn, they lived in Dothan, not Dothan, Illinois. It's right out of DeCoin. And I know the name, but it don't come to me. Anyhow, I called him, and I said, "Fats, I sure would appreciate it if you could come down. It's for the American Cancer Society." And I said, "I can't really pay you anything, but I can take care of all your expenses." And of course, we were very close friends. He said, "You don't have to pay me anything, Eddie. I'll come down." And so he did. We sold all the tickets, upstairs, we had 16 tables downstairs, a snooker table and a carom billiard table that has no pockets. Upstairs, we had 160 rocking chair theater seats and a pool table. My wife, Vi, found some wallpaper that had pool balls on it and everything. I don't know how in the world she ever found them, but it was actually beautiful upstairs. I wouldn't call it a tournament room because we didn't have any tournaments. But anyhow, we sold out, and Fats came down, and we were supposed to play, but I missed a couple of shots. I missed a shot and sat down, and I never got back up because actually Fats was a star. They didn't come down. They saw me all the time, and so he took over, and I wanted him to take over. But everybody enjoyed it very much. He was on TV and the radio, and he told everyone what a beautiful place we had, and really talked about the place and said that I was one of the greatest players that in the world, one of the greatest, and that we had a real nice place for the families to come, and he helped out a lot. Now, there was about 15 or 20 bars called me and wanted to know if Fats would come by for like 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, make an appearance, that they would pay him $150. So I told him, I said, Fats, we can go to about 10 or 15 places and you can make like 2,000 with no problem. I'll go with you. And you don't have to go in. We'll go in and say hello and sign an autograph or two, and that's it. So he said, no, I don't want to do it. He didn't need it. He was with Montgomery Ward at the time, too. So the next day, he was playing a little kid about 9 years old, on the front table. And the fella called me from the VA hospital, which Vi had been over there. My wife had been over there. And she said they didn't even have air conditioning. And this fella called me from the VA hospital and said there was some fellas there that would just love to see Fats. And I said, well, I don't know. He's right here on the front table. Let me ask him. Of course, the guy done told me he couldn't pay him anything. So I said, wait just a minute, I'll ask him. I said, Fats, you think we can run over there to the VA hospital? Those fellows over there would just love to see you. He said, sure, Eddie. That's like 100 degrees outside. And so here we went. And Fats played about 45, 50 minutes, sweat before they got him a towel. And they had a big old fan, but it was just putting out hot air. But I thought that was very, very, very generous of him to do that, very thoughtful. So Fats, to me, has got a heart that big. I mean, if there's any animals or anything that's in trouble or on the side of the road, he'll pick them up and take them to a vet. He's got a big heart. Now I'm going to tell you a funny story while he's there. Over next, 3 doors away was the Italian restaurant. We're over there with 2 reporters, a fella and a lady. We're sitting at this table. Fats is telling this story. He said, this fella here is one of the world's greatest bank pool players that ever lived, and I don't know what all. And he said, my game was one pocket. He said, one time we played in Philadelphia at Elmer Dyke's pool room, who used to be the manager of the Chicago White Sox. He wanted to play me in Philadelphia, and I said, Saki wants to get into the act. So we played in Philadelphia. He said we played 3 days and nights. Said we was playing a game of banks for $500, and a game of one pocket for 500. And he said, we played 3 days and nights and broke dead even. Now, I went back to the billiard room. My wife was working. And I told my wife, I said, Vi, I said, I just got the greatest compliment I ever got in my life. And she said, what's that? I said, Minnesota Fats said we played 3 days and nights and broke dead even. And she kind of laughed. She said, that is a hell of a compliment. Because nobody ever beat Minnesota Fats. Nobody. I'd just like to say that I think that Minnesota Fats did more for pool than anybody that I ever saw or heard of in my life. In 1966, I believe it was, they had, besides his celebrity shows in California and Hollywood, he had a show called the Minnesota Fats Show. That was on Channel 32, the VHF station in Chicago, Illinois. And the show consisted of 9-ball, banks, and one pocket. And it was 2 hours live. There was 13 episodes, and he played some of the best players in the world. And he beat some of the best players in the world. But the studio, when I played him, the night that I played him, you could not get close to the studio. The studio was packed, and you couldn't get in. I'm sure that all of the shows were that way. It wasn't just because that I was playing him that night. These shows were 2 hours live every Monday night. And they had certain rules. If you won one of the episodes, if you won one of the matches like 9-ball or banks or one pocket, if you didn't make a ball, you got $600. If you won 2 out of 3 of the matches, you got $700. If you won all 3 matches, you got $1,000. There was only 2 people that got $1,000. And Fats, like I said before, he beat some of the fellas. I think it was myself, I got 1,000, and I played very good that night, as good as I probably ever played in my life. But the thing that made the tape so good was that Fats played real good too. It just happened that I was lucky enough to win. But only 2 people beat him. I believe it was Billy Burge and myself. But the people that owned the billiard rooms there in Chicago was like starving to death. So I heard that they were just about to close. And that Minnesota Fats show for 13 weeks saved those pool rooms. So I heard. Now I didn't only hear this from one person, I heard it from several persons, that Fats really, he just brought pool back like the movie The Hustler. At the time of The Hustler, the movie, actually pool was pretty dead. And after that movie, it just seemed like it revived pool. And that's why, like about 1960, Mr. Roy Gandy in Macon, Georgia, he started having a tournament. See, they'd only had like one tournament, one pool tournament a year. And the winner, the world champion, got like $2,500. You had to qualify for that through the regional and the section. There'd usually be like 12 in it. Mosconi'd usually win all the tournaments. He'd hardly ever lose a match. Willie Mosconi, outside of a pool room, to go out to dinner or anywhere else outside of the pool room, was a perfect gentleman. You wouldn't want to go with a nicer, you couldn't find a nicer person to go out to dinner, to go anywhere else but a pool room. In a pool room, he just had such a, I don't know the word to say, he could not stand to lose. Jimmy Karras and I were talking, this was really funny, when we were in Las Vegas this past July. We were talking, and I was asking him about, I knew he played Mosconi lots of times. And I knew he beat Mosconi lots of times. And he said, you know, Eddie, a lot of times when I would beat Mosconi, he wouldn't talk to me for a year. And I couldn't believe, I could believe it knowing Mosconi, he just could not stand to lose. But he was a real gentleman, really a nice guy outside the pool room. He was a lovely guy, but in the pool room, if everything didn't go just exactly perfect, he was hard to get along with. But I played him for a week down in Mr. Baker's in Tampa, and we go out and play golf in the afternoon, and we played pool at night, and we'd go to dinner. And just everything was beautiful.
As a kid in the early 60s, I was lucky enough to be in Johnson City, Illinois, and watch you queue up against a man named Wimpy. Tell us about Mr. Luther Lassiter.
Well, Lassiter and I had been friends for years. We never had played each other, but we had been friends for years and never played each other until I would say in Johnston City. George Jansko and Paulie. George Jansko really started, they used to have what they call pool jamborees. Pool players would get their backers and go there and play each other for money. And the next thing you know, George decided he would have a tournament in 1961. I think it was 61. And he had a one-pocket tournament, and I didn't do any good at all in it. A fellow named Johnny Vivas won it. Then the next year he said he was going to have all three. He was going to have straight pool, 9-ball, and one pocket. So that year, 62, I think Squirrel, boy from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, he won the one pocket. I did pretty good, but I didn't win any. Oh, let's see. No, I didn't. But then the next year they had more in it, and the next year in 63 they had Sports Spectacular was there. Johnson City, Illinois was a population of about 600 people. And there was people there from all over the United States. I don't know how Jansko did it. He was just a tremendous promoter. And they had all of those cameras, those trucks outside. And that year, that was 63, I won the one pocket, and Lassiter won the 9-ball and the straight pool. So we played on Sports Spectacular, and Lassiter beat me very bad, beat me in just about everything. The next year, after he beat me the second time, there was no need in going any further, but we did. But the next time we played, the next year, the same tournament, the next year in '64, he won the 9-ball, he won the straight pool, and I won the one pocket again. So I was a world champion one pocket player in '63, the world champion one pocket player in '64, but not the all-around champion in '63. Now in '64 we're playing on Wide World of Sports this year for the world's all-around championship. So we played, and I beat him the 9-balls to first. He beat me the straight pool second, and now the one pocket made the difference of the whole thing. And I was lucky enough to beat him 4-3. The player on my far left is Bill Staten, better known as Weenie Beanie, who is a very good player. We used to travel together and played exhibitions all over the country. The fellow on my right is better known as Jersey Red. His name is Jack Brett, and that is his wife, Dottie. They are now living in Houston. Jersey Red was a very, very good player, and hopefully Red deserves to be into the Hall of Fame, and I hope that he accomplishes this very soon.
How about Joe Balsas?
Joe Balsas, Joe was a tremendous player. They called him the butcher. He was in the meat business. And he said that he had watched some of the players play. He didn't play for about 15 years, and he thought he could do just as good, and he could. And he got back into the game, and he did do just as good. And I played Joe. I beat Joe a couple of times. When they had a double round robin in New York, I beat him twice. In California, I broke the balls. He ran 143. We were going to 150, and I said, why in the world didn't you go ahead and run that other 7? You didn't let me, so I wouldn't have to struggle so much. But Joe was a tremendous player and a very nice guy.
Did you know Willie Hoppy? I know he's
never knew Willie Hoppy at all, because he was a three-cushion billiard player, and I think he was a little hard to get to know anyhow. But I was never around him at all. Harold Worst, who was the world's champion three-cushion billiard player, I had heard about Harold before he came to Johnston City, because he was a world champion three-cushion billiard player. But he played all games very, very good, and was a very nice fellow, really a nice guy. And he had cancer, and nobody knew it. Nobody knew anything about it at all until he was playing in the tournament at the last in California, and he died about 6 months after that. But he was a tremendous player, and he was also a tremendous guy.
Eddie, there's something new in billiards, and not totally new, but women in billiards, women professional billiard players. I see in 1981, Miss Dorothy Wise was inducted into the Pool Hall of Fame as the first woman pool player.
Well, I met Dorothy in California, but I was never really around her, but very, very little. Now, there was a lady, now I'm going to have trouble thinking of her name, back years ago, Ruth McGinnis, M-C-G-I-N-N-I-S, Ruth McGinnis. Now, she was left-handed, and she put on exhibitions everywhere. In fact, I played her 3, 4, 5 times in different cities. She could run 70, 80 balls. She looked like a man at the table, and she played like a man. And I mean, she could run some balls. She was a very good player. Of course, I met Jean Belucas when she was at the tournament I was in New York that I was telling you about a while ago, where I met Robert Ryan. she was there practicing in another room. She was only 9 or 10 years old at that time, but I could see that she was going. I could see that she was going to be a good player. I could see that. You could tell, I mean, it wasn't. It's not hard to tell. When there was a kid in our pool room, in our billiard room down in St. Petersburg, and he was the one that was playing Fats on the day that the fella called me from the VA about Fats. He was playing Fats on the front table, and he was a natural player. He was a natural player, and he was going to be a great player if he had, but he liked all sports. And I'd like to tell you this little story. At 6 o'clock, I would usually be there. My wife would open up at 11, and I'd usually go down around 4 or 4:30, and I'd stay, of course, until we closed. And along about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, there wouldn't be any of the kids there. They're all home, for supper. But about, I guess it was maybe 5:45. I'd been there in the billiard room by myself, not doing anything. Probably reading the paper or working a crossword puzzle. I almost said his name. I wish I'd think of his name. Anyhow, he came in. Maybe I'll think of it in a minute. He came in. This is where I need by. He came in, and he had some marbles in his pocket. And he said, I said, where you been? I started to say his name. I said, where you been? He said, I've been playing marbles. Well, I said, now you're not going to believe this, but I said, I was a champion marble shooter one time. He said, oh, Mr. Taylor, naturally he looks at me like I'm the biggest liar in the world. I said, no, really, I won the school championship, and if I could have beat this other fella, I said I'd have had a chance to go to Pittsburgh and play in the championship. And Mr. Taylor, So I said, hey, well, I tell you what, let me see a couple of your marbles. So I got over on the pool table. I put the 9-ball on the spot, and I got back behind the line to where you would shoot a spot shot. And I got down like this, and I aimed. I'm just trying to hit the 9-ball. I shot. You're not going to believe what happened. I made the spot shot with the marble. I know you're not going to believe it, but I can prove it by Vi. She wasn't there, but the kid, he told everybody. 3 months he told everybody, you're not going to believe what happened. Mr. Taylor took a marble from back at the line and shot the 9-ball in the corner pocket. Of course, naturally, I didn't do it again. I didn't even try it again. Never. They have, I think now, 3 $50,000 tournaments each year. In my estimation, the ladies has gotten bigger than the men's. They have numerous ladies tournaments today all over the country and even out of the country. They've got ladies playing from Germany. They've got ladies playing from Sweden and several other countries. In other words, it has really gotten big, the ladies has. I can't. And every now and then, if you watch TV, every now and then they have some, and I'll tell you, they have some girls there that can really play. Well, I'd like to say this about the snooker in England. They have 6 hours every day of snooker. They play on a 6x12 table, and I think the reason it's so, you can see it so good on television is because of all of the red balls and the table being so big. It's a 6x12. Now what we did yesterday was on a 4.5x9. Then they have the 5x10s, which is usually the size of a regulation snooker table. But over there, they play on a larger table, a 6 by 12, and I think that's why it shows up with the red balls and everything, and the leading snooker player in England makes $2 million a year.
Kind of makes you want to take up snooker again, huh?
Gosh, I'd like to be young again. That's where I would head, to England.
What were the best states for playing pool?
The South. The South were the best. Most of the pool players, the old pool players that came from Pennsylvania, New York, to the South, they never went back. They thought they'd died and gone to heaven. I remember one fellow from Philadelphia, Dayton Olmsted. He came, they played around there for $3 and $5. In New York, the same thing. I'm talking about the top players. He came into Charleston, West Virginia. They had a ring 9-ball game, $20 a man, and there was 7 in it. And he got in it and won like $1,200 the first night, and he died in Johnson City, Tennessee. He never went back. They always gambled more in the South than they did anywhere else on pool. Now, it could be different today, but I'm talking about back in my day.
Do you think pool hustling is over?
I've always prayed that I would live long enough to see the good players of today make a decent living without having to go out on the road and try to make a living hustling. But I don't know if I'm ever going to see it, because I don't know if I'm going to be around that long. But today, I remember 3 or 4 years ago in Dallas, Texas, Buddy Hall, who is a very close friend of mine, was the leading money winner that year. And I think they had it in the magazine that he had made like $38,000 or something like that year. Now, he had a family, several kids, and a family to take care of. And we're talking, and we're having dinner, and I said, well, buddy, can you, with this and with that and with this and with that, can you make a decent living? Can't do it. So they've got, now that lady that we were speaking of a while ago, I think last year she made something like $48,000. So in other words, it's gotten better, it's gotten bigger, and it's gotten better, and I just can't understand why that it don't get big. I think one reason is because if y'all will bear with me and watch the next tournament that's shown on TV with the girls or the fellas, you'll see that you can't really see the numbers on the balls. If you're not a player, you can't really tell exactly what is happening. And I think that's a shame, because when we first played on Sports Spectacular and they showed that later, it was horrible. And then when we played, and then on Wide World of Sports the next year, that wasn't really any good either. And if you can't see what's going on, if you watch two fellas playing ping pong, they're standing way back, but you can still keep up with the ball. They're whipping it across that net and whipping back and forth. But you can usually still see pretty much and the tennis, you can see that good. You can see the tennis good because it got bigger space. And the golf, they follow the golf ball. But now for a while, they were shooting like, say you would get down at the end of the pocket and they're shooting towards you. That was good. But that's hard on the player. This is Johnny Irish, who was from New York and was a tremendous all-around player, played everything very, very well. I've known Steve for quite a while. He is a tremendous player and a tremendous guy. And he's also in the Hall of Fame, where he definitely belongs. Well, Mike is another great Hall of Fame champion, Mike Siegel. I have watched him play a few times in his later years, and I thought he was a very, very, very good player and a real gentleman. That's Nick Varner and his wife. Now, Nick is a very good straight pool player. He was a world champion. He's also a world champion 9-ball player and champion 1-pocket player. He's played everything very, very well. That is Jimmy Moore and his wife, Julie. Now, Jimmy I've known for probably at least 60 years. Of course, he played everything very, very well. And he also had one of the most beautiful strokes that I have ever seen, and is just a very, very nice fellow. This is Ray Martin. Ray is a very competitive straight pool player and also plays a very good game of 9-ball and probably anything else that he played. This is Cicero Murphy, who is a world champion straight pool player. He also played other games very well and was a very nice fellow. Utley Puckett, U.J. Puckett put that name on me in Hot Springs, Arkansas in 1947. I had beat Puckett a few times, and so at the end of the race meet, I went into the billiard room. I came from the racetrack, and I went into the billiard room, and everybody was gone. There was a couple of guys there that didn't play. I said, "Where is everybody?" He said, "Well, I guess everybody left." So I called this girl up that I knew. So naturally, I started to go out. I said, "Well, I might as well go out and party." I hadn't drank any the whole time I'd been there, about 2 months. And so she came by and picked me up. She had a new Pontiac. I'll never forget that. So we went to one place and had 2 or 3 drinks, and then we went to and danced a little. And we went to another place that had a band, and had 2 or 3 drinks there and danced 4 or 5 times. And about that time, I didn't even hear them, and the guy on the loudspeaker said Eddie Taylor wanted at the front door. And I didn't hear it for some reason or other, and she said, "I think they called your name at the door, Eddie." So I went to the door, and it was a cab driver. And the cab driver says to me, "There's a fellow down at the pool room, U.J. Puckett," he said. Puckett said, "If you wanted to play some to get your you-know-what on down there." I said, "Listen, in case I don't beat you down there," I said, "tell him I'm on my way." So I told her, and I said, "You can go upstairs too." A lot of fellows took their wives, and the girls upstairs, the high-rolling gamblers, and it was all right. It was nice. So here we go. And there was a liquor store right next door to this billiard room. So I went in and I got a 5th of Jack Daniels, went upstairs, and the fellow that was staking Puckett was Red Wynn, who was a high-rolling gambler. He staked Puckett a lot. He was really a nice guy. He died in Vegas. High-class guy, real nice fellow. So we started playing. I always gave Puckett 8-7. We started playing for 200 a game. We seesawed maybe four games, and then I beat him 6 in a row. And Puckett quit. He went over and he sat down. Me and Red Wind is taking a drink every 5 minutes. We're taking a drink, fixing a drink, fixing a drink. And so Puckett goes over and sits down. He didn't have much hair then, kind of like me, and what little hair he had was kind of down in his, on his forehead. And he was hollering, and he said, "Boy, you think I ain't a smart son of a so-and-so?" He said, "I give a cab driver $20 to go out here and get a goddamn drunk to come in here and rob me one more time." And he said, "All I can tell you is, you might as well fool with one of them Smoky Mountain Bears as to fool with Taylor." And for some reason or other, that caught on, and everybody started calling me the Bear, and I didn't like it, but I wasn't nothing I could do about it. So when I got back home, it was in the newspaper. So that's who started it, and it stuck, and I didn't like it, but it didn't make any difference. I said, well, it's a far cry from Jack Nicklaus.
Did you ever find yourself in a situation that was dangerous? You thought?
Yes, one time years ago, I stopped in a little place. It was like they had a tabernacle there, a tent set up. I don't know exactly. It seemed like they said they was going to have a movie later, and there was a store next door where they only had like confectionery and maybe soft drinks, and they had a little pool table in there. And I heard this as I went by. It was kind of like on a gravel road. I don't think that was the regular road, but we maybe had to detour a little bit. So I heard, and I told the fellow that I was with, I said, "Stop the car, I heard pool balls." This was 1938. I walked into this place, and they had a small table. It only had 10 balls on the table, and there was a kid knocking the balls around. And there was an elderly man, a real old man, that was like the owner. So I got a Coca-Cola or something and started talking about pool. And to make a long story short, I played this kid for $5 a game, and I beat him like 6 games. The last game I beat him, the old man went behind the counter, and he came back out with a Civil War relic that was like that long, and pointed it at me and said, "Put all that money back on the table and keep $5 and get out of here before I kill you." And I said, "Well, Dad, I wasn't going to keep the money to start with. It was all in fun. I didn't, He thought I was a hustler, and my fellow that I was with was also in there. In the meantime, when he came back out with the big Civil War relic, it might not even have shot if he'd have pulled the trigger. But of course, I didn't want to test it. But anyhow, the fellow that I was with, he was gone. He went on out the door. Naturally, there wasn't no need in both of us getting shot. But he didn't really know what was going to happen. But it didn't really bother me at the time. But I laid down the money, and I was going to give it all back. He made me keep $5. When I went out, the fellow that I was with, he was about a half a block up the street in the car. But I caught up with him, and nothing happened. But after about 15 minutes, I got back in the car. Then I started shaking. That's when I really got nervous, after it was over with. But it didn't bother me while it happened.
If you had it to do over again, how would you do it?
Same way.
No regrets?
No regrets at all. I enjoyed it a lot. There was a lot of hard times, but there was also a lot of good times. So I think if I almost died a couple of times, if it hadn't been for my wife, I probably would have.
From your heart?
From my heart. But in fact, I'm sure that if it hadn't been for her, I would have died right here. She got me to the hospital in time, both times. I wasn't breathing for like 20 minutes on my own. I was dead. They thought I was going to wind up with brain damage, but I told them I'd already been brain damaged before from hustling pool. And then I had cardiac arrest that time, and the next time I had congestive heart failure. And that time, first time, I didn't really realize because I was passed out. But the time I had the congestive heart failure, I really thought I was going to die. So I told her that afterwards, later on, I said, you know, I really thought I was going to die, Vi. She said, oh, I knew you wasn't going to die that time. She said, I wasn't worried about you dying that time. She said, the first time I thought I'd lost you. I said, what do you mean? You wasn't worried about me the second time. She said, oh, they still had lots of things they could do. The second time, they still had the track, what do you call that? The put down, you know, to make you breathe. To help you breathe. But I said,
no regrets.
No regrets. No, I like I said, it hasn't all been fun and roses, but I would definitely do the same thing again. Alfie was riding around in a motorhome, and he always carried that bicycle on the back. When he'd get to town, he'd get on that bicycle and ride in front of the pool room. Everybody thought he was just got home from high school. But when he left, they all changed their mind that he wasn't just a bicycle rider, he was also a hell of a pool player.